Good evening. If you're listening to this and you're in London, it's about 7 o'clock. And if you're here in Tucson, it's 12 noon. The purpose of these podcasts is to gather our gang together. Those gals, you who have children and you can't make ends meet, you can't make the budget. And those guys who are trying to support a wife and child, but they just can't do it. You can't make ends meet. We're going to gather our gang together and we're going to ask how much money do you need to run a household and how many hours you have to work if you're a man to come up with a family budget. We've had three or four of these podcasts now to try and gather our gang together. And so we just have to pass the word. I doubt if anybody heard the first couple simply because it's just how it works. So if you're listening to this, please tune in and start being bossy. Remember, they threw out home economics. Home economics, as a reminder, is when the family unit, the married couple, is viewed as a base economic unit. It's what gets people out of poverty and into plenty. And so if you picture a detached house from the 1950s America, United States, and then go out to the side and start with farming and mining, then above that, manufacturing, above that, wholesale, retail, and repair, and above that, retirement, education, and recreation. And then doctors and lawyers become a kind of lattice that holds it all together. And the Catholic priest is what causes all this to come into being to begin with. It's a religious thing. It's a God and country thing. In the end, it's a Catholic thing. The Pope holds the moral high ground, and you put the Pope in charge, and then a different set of rules come in, God and country. And they threw all this out in the 1970s in the United States. In the 1950s, the communists came out and said they would overthrow the United States by about the year 1973. And in 1973, that era, it was a major change in our society. In philosophy, they threw out, I believe it's the fourth and fifth, the idea of God and country, which is straightening out your emotions, willing the good of another person, and doing it because of that computer cloud of emotion, Christ rising on the third day. And those three things, those three things make up God and country. In other words, you're a normal, well-adjusted person, then you become a good wife and a good husband, then you become a good mother if you choose that as a profession, and a good father, and then you become a good citizen. And they threw all that out. Give it some time, and now we live in a peasant and property class society, and you guys are just living in despair. The Christmas was just a few days ago, and you can just hear some of the gals. I can only come up with a couple of presents for my child. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I have to work Christmas. There was a time when you couldn't find a store open in the United States at Christmas time. That's because everybody viewed themselves in the terms of we. And the intellectual crowd came in, Harry the hippie and Al the Afro and Donna the feminist, and they changed things into a peasant and property class society. They live in the foothills, and you either live in apartments or live in housing projects. And it's just the way it is. And hopefully we better do something about that. By the way, I skipped a bit. When it comes to home economics, there's that married couple and they're in a house. And then you ask the gal how many oranges she wants to use throughout the year. You know how many orange trees to plant in order to get everybody out of poverty and into plenty. I picture a young couple choosing between buying a couch or buying two recliner chairs for their living room. And you can just daydream and see all the farms and mines change in order to come up with a couch instead of a recliner chair, and all the manufacturing and the way the stores and the advertising change in order to get that couple what they want. And there are rules. The same people that do the producing have to do the consuming, and they have to be normal, well-adjusted people. They have to be a Yank. And that's what they threw out. You're paying the price for it. That gal, Another gal I was listening to, she said, I take home about $2,000 a month and I pay about $1,600 in rent and I only have $400 left. I don't know what I'm going to do. It doesn't work out. It's beyond despair. They're way past tears. How about the guy? If you're a guy and you don't make it in home economics, being a Yank or a British Yank, you uh, everything's arranged so you make enough money to support a wife and 2.2 children, they used to say in my day. And that was all thrown out. And so on the one hand, you're called a male chauvinist pig if you don't support the wife and child. And what happened to the upper class? Well, they moved into the foothills and they became the professional consumers. And you're a peon, and you're not called a peon for nothing. And you just have to stand up to this stuff. We have, by the way, about 3 dozen or more anecdotes, about 5 or 10 minute anecdotes on a couple of YouTube channels. And so here we're going to ramble in the good sense of the word and repeat things and try and get things out in hopes that you'll start typing in. Miguel, I have a 2-year-old. I don't know what I'm going to do. This is how much money I make. And then you ask that same gal, how much money do you need to run a household as if you were running a business? Get shoes for the child and bed sheets and get the junior to a dentist and get yourself to a dentist, and how much money is food. And if you're going to do the producing, you're going to do the consuming. Once a child gets into school, how much are tennis lessons? You get to go out and play in that silly tennis tournament they have every year, and that sort of thing. Let me pause and then continue. You arrange the physical, the child, taking care of the child with the physical pleasures of sex, with the romance of sex, and at the very top of that romance is a nun. And you line things up that way. And so you put the nun in charge and you actually in charge, and you arrange parameters of competition so that there's home economics. And watch, poverty will fly right out the window. The same thing with a guy. If you arrange parameters of competition so that you pay a guy enough money to support a wife and child, then that's it. Everything else is a question of a deduction, filling in the blanks. How many farms do we need? What kind of farms? And that sort of thing. Let me pause and then continue. In England, let me give some examples of how things get so twisted around that it doesn't do any good to argue any of it. Socialized medicine would be a good example. You're a gal, you're sitting there and you're saying, how do I get this kid to a dentist or a doctor? A dentist, by the way, are one of the first things that go. So it's a good idea to remember that. The first thing you neglect is your teeth if you're a person, and it's no fault of yours. It's just what you do, you have to do. And if you change the scale in society, it's the same thing. And so poor dentists are in terrible trouble. Let me go back. Socialized medicine. Should you have socialized medicine, or should you not have socialized medicine? Should you go through the government, or should you go through the private sector? And the answer is no, pure and simple. You don't go through the government, you don't go through the private sector. What do? You go to the Supreme Court in the United States or that Parliament in England, and you set the standard. From now on, it's God and country. Society is made up of our citizenry and our culture. You're a good person, and then a good husband, and then a good father. And then society is made up of the summation of family units. And so picture yourself in home economics. And you do have a culture. We refer to ourselves as we around here. You have the leadership style of washing the feet of the apostles. And so that doctor or dentist is a Yank, a Catholic dentist, a Catholic dentist in the pews. And he has the disposition of helping us when we're sick or helping us when we have a toothache. And so there he is. And I insist, even though it goes against nature or Mother Nature, I insist that that doctor lives in a doctor's and lawyer's house, and that he takes Wednesdays off, and he drives a Cadillac, and he goes and plays in that silly tennis tournament, the country club, or they have every year. And quite frankly, it goes against Mother Nature. It goes against our psychology. It's actually the most violent position you can take. And it's the application of decency as a formal argument. And once you get that far, once you get back to our world, home economics, and then you just try and put a Cadillac in that doctor's dentist driveway, and then you ask him, does he need a secretary? Start a secretary school. If he needs a specialist, then start a specialist school. And then from there, you get the business types. And then you talk about whether you should take taxes from the guy who's working in order to pay the dentist, or you have the guy, the household unit, our guys, our husbands, go through the private sector. Or maybe they buy in insurance, and that insurance company issues stock that would be called the quasi-public sector. They couldn't care less, whichever works the best. Do you see the idea that socialized medicine over here has a completely different definition than over there? Great Britain used to be an example, and you're leaning on them is sort of a compliment in a kind of way. And they would have socialized medicine, but only if you don't have any money. And they would have private medicine if you have lots of money. And so the question is, wait a minute, how come you can afford to go to the doctor privately? And why would you? And instead of going through the public health system. And you got a problem there. And that's because there's a peasant and property class society. Medicine is medicine. Medicine and food are you only eat so much. You only need so much medicine. And so for it to be there really isn't dependent on your income. And so to have a peasant and property class society, to have a healthcare system only for the poor and a rich guy's healthcare system, no, it doesn't work. It's not supposed to work that way. And take it as a compliment if you're from Great Britain, that you guys were as good as trying hard to do the right thing as anybody. The military used to be exceptionally good with their healthcare system. There's a huge Air Force base here in Tucson, and they used, up until Bill Clinton became president, they had an absolutely terrific healthcare system, although their dentistry was a little iffy. And you can compare that with many of the militaries in the communist country and lots of other countries, where the colonel gets, and the colonel's wife and kids and that sort of thing, they get to go see the doctor first, and the enlisted corps are last on the list. If you said that here in Tucson at the Air Force guys, they would get put out with that. They used to make a big deal out of, no, we don't do that here. And you have to go back to that. Excuse me. One of the things to make a point is the very definition of economics. The definition of economics is the allocation of the science of the allocation of limited resources. And that was one of the things they threw out in the 70s, along with everything else. And they would say things like this: the United States is such a huge country, it's very easy for us to go into debt. All you have to do is pay on the interest on that debt. And so theoretically, you can carry that on forever. And because of that, we get to say, we get to act as if we had a blank check and unlimited resources. And they did. And so what did they do? They picked out, they had all the sex and drugs they could get their hands on. They got out into all the gold and real estate they could get their hands on. They moved in the foothills and they created a class of peasantry. They couldn't care less. But that's those university professors. There was an explosion of universities in this country. The pushing out of the priests and nuns and what in this camp are called the good guys, you, the home economist, and the average Joe. And well, that's it. They couldn't care less. So we're hoping you will chime in. New Year's is coming up, and it should be you. You're the one that should be able to take the evening off and find a babysitter, and it's for you to head out in the town and celebrate New Year's. I not only hope you do, I hope you insist on it. And if you're the guy and you're driving a forklift in Tollsbury, England, or Boston, Massachusetts, I hope you rather insist on it. This is ridiculous. So how much money do you pay in rent? And how much money is a household budget? And how many hours do you have to work in order to come up with that? If you happen to be a gal with a couple of teenage daughters, what in the world do you do? And somebody out there throw a fit. This business about calling stuff like this welfare and food stamps and that sort of thing, where these other people were considered the consumption society, is getting a little silly. It's for a little bit later, but Donald Trump just won. I never believed he did. Donald Trump ran to standing up to a bum's rush. And that was the important thing. And they have everything so monopolized. He would have had, in order to win, that guy would have had to have had an overwhelming majority of support to get by all the corruption in this country at the moment. And he did, bless his heart. And then there's going to be a horrible mistake made right off the bat, isn't there? Donald Trump ran standing up to a bum's rush. You don't go from the Democrats back to the Republicans, or from the liberals back to the conservatives. It's not going to work. And in fact, even from my day, there was Ronald Reagan. He was a stereotypical blue-collar Democrat. He was not only a union man, but he was a union leader and quite good at it. And he switched from the Democrats to the Republicans just because the Democrats became so Marxist. And I used to keep tabs. I mean, it's a thing when it comes to the Republican Party, you sort of listen to find out what their attitude is towards social services, and the opposite with the Democratic Party. He was quite good at trying to put food in people's mouths, trying to make another person better off. And he didn't get anywhere in the end. And so you're going to make a horrible mistake right off the bat. Just to sneak something in you can't stand up to a bum's rush. You have to have a third person do it for you. And so it's up to you to turn around and go behind Donald Trump's back and stand up for the guy. So let's pause and then continue. If you're a gal and you have a couple of teenage characters, please speak in and say, this is what I need in order to go back to home economics. You have to do what those Brits are so good at. If you start walking with good posture, you start being a bit bossy, and you start doing things the scientific method. You're the good mom or mom, and then you have a household budget in front of you, and you have to start filling in the blanks. And if you're a guy, you have to start coming up with the budget for this. How many hours do you work? How many farms are there, by the way? How many mines are there in England and the United States and a few of these other countries? How many manufacturing? They put all the manufacturing overseas, and they paid those guys horrible. They made everybody in China all wear the same clothes for at least a generation. That was one of the things from my school days. It takes a minimum of 3 generations to economically develop a third world country. And the first generation is kind of shot, and the second generation has one foot in one door and one in the other. And the third generation is brought up. And I have a feeling the communists took that to heart and literally enslaved everybody. Now, communist China has become this very nationalistic. They view themselves as the only true human beings on the face of the earth. They have no moral compass, to quote somebody on the computer who was head of the World Bank and lived in China for a while. And they're going to become this vicious group, and there's not going to be anybody to stand up to them. That makes sense if you're an atheistic scientist. Evolution is evolution, and the communist Russians, the communist Chinese simply evolved from the communist Russians, and they're simply plus one. Like a baseball player or like a basketball player's become taller, they're going to be more vicious and more ruthless, and it's just the way it is. We'll come back over here and we'll place a heart in all of this. You can think in a shop manual version, which is all at my level. I do, and that's you can get away with thinking of Catholicism as communism with a formal argument of decency, and that decency, that attitude is an attitude in you. The Pope holds the moral high ground, and so if I choose to put the Pope in charge, then I'm in the pews. I hold the moral high ground, and we go back to being a regular Yank. A well-adjusted person, a good citizen, and then a good mother and father, and then home economics. I will the good of another person. I adopt Christ as that star in the sky, and he's a perfect person. And then I straighten myself up emotionally, and I will the good of another person. Those 3 things that make up God and country. It's inside a person, and it's inside, hopefully, the people who are listening to this. It's inside you, and so you're just going to have to start speaking up and saying something. By the way, I'm opening my mouth here. So what's wrong? What do you do about it? And how do you do it? What's wrong? They threw out God and country. They threw out those 3 things that make up God and country. What do I do about it? Well, the judges wore black robes because Catholic priests 500 years ago in England wore black robes. For a while there, they were pretty good at saying that the priest and the pimp. The priest says, say what you mean what you say, everything else comes from evil. And then the pimp. And the pimp knows how to hustle, con, manipulate, and intimidate people. And 500 years ago, before things changed, the pimp was malicious. And all the laws were against him. You get arrested, you get thrown in jail for this. And the laws would favor the priest, favor the good guys. In the United States, particularly after World War II, this was taken seriously, and they were getting good at it. Compare a detached house and the life that we lived in, or they lived in the United States, with the way things are today. This house was built right around 1950. This is a house I grew up in, and our parents, our dad was a repairman. And he could afford a 3-bedroom brick house and a half-acre lot. And 2 doors down was a milkman. And there was a teacher and a guy who worked in a feed store and a photographer, I think. And a couple that came over from Poland after the war ended. And the average middle class had an incredibly high standard of living. It was done intentionally. That was thrown out. That was the God and country, the other intellectual position, and it was thrown out in favor of the people who are now head of the university departments and head of the government right now. You better wake up to this sort of stuff. Let's introduce one of our fancy graphs, the lazy V. So I can do this. Picture the world from 1950s, and then or the toggle switch was flipped over in about 1950s, and then our society changed in a big way in the 70s. And here in the United States and in England they're usually ahead of the curve in this sort of thing. So picture a little dot over here, and then picture the lazy V, a letter V on its side, and it goes up and up and up. And then get into all the golden real estate you can. Put the wife goes out, the husband makes enough money to support a wife and child, and the feminist movement came in. And she went out to work, only she was never in the workplace. That's called the consumption society. And then the family budget, that was extra income. That is income that wasn't intended to pay for the electric bill and the gas bill. And so what did they do with that income? Well, they got into a duplex, and around here, rented it out to as many Mexicans as they could, and they became the upper class and a peasant and property class society. They changed our society. And there's an attitude that goes with that. Take a look, and whether it's the feminist movement, whether it's Harry the hippie or Al the Afro or Donna the feminist, they all have that in common. They hustle. They have no sense of love in them, no sense of empathy. They couldn't care less that they caused other people to have to work more hours. It's the Bible that says that causing poverty is one of the unforgivable sins. They couldn't care less about it. It's not my religion, they'd say. And that's what happened. And so let's go back to our lazy V. Picture time going from the 70s up to today, and you'll picture the letter V on its side. And at the end of this V, there's these people living in the foothills, and they own the apartments or control the housing projects. Now go back over here to the dot and draw a line straight through the middle. And this represents the middle class, God and country, the middle class, the leadership style of washing the feet of the apostles. We're all in the same boat. And so our gal, the gal who changes the dirty diapers gets the sex. The priest who takes a vow of poverty maximizes profits. And we do the producing, and we get the next generation of kids raised. And then we line things up. The guy has a job working at the furniture factory, and then tennis is a recreation. If the gal chooses to be a mother, then when she gets the kids raised, and once the kids are in school, then she gets to go play in that silly tennis tournament and that sort of thing. And there's an attitude. You can go back to movies from the 1950s, and you can pick up on the demeanor. And it's so easy to confuse that demeanor, being courageous, brave, and strong, kind, compassionate, and just, with the feminist movement and with the tough guys. If you're a guy, for some reason, being vicious was confused with courage, and being ruthless was confused with being an intelligent person. No, it's got that one wrong. Let's go back. So there's over here in this today, and these people up at the top of this lazy V, when they exist, these people down here, all these people who have to live in housing projects in Chicago and who have to rent property and can't afford it, and who now are living on the streets, they're down here. And these people in the middle, that's hopefully you and I, they don't exist. They can't exist. These exist, this can't exist. But when this exists, when it's God and country, go to the Supreme Court. From now on, it's the Apostles' Creed. It's God and country. Then our citizenry and our family, the society is made up of the summation of family units. These people exist. Then these people are the enemy, and these people disappear. If home economics exists, these people live in poverty, disappear. But these people up here, they can't exist. They're the enemies. And they won. It's the long and short of it. And so we're going along. We'll end this, and hopefully people will start passing the word around. We'll try and be at 7 o'clock tomorrow and at 4 o'clock on the Sunday afternoon, London time. And it seems important to get the Brits, especially with what's happening. You can sort of see it over there. so many people like Muslims want to change society, and uh, you get the idea. Uh, you see, forgive me, gals in courts dressed up like guys, and people who are judges wearing headband or things on their head that uh, uh, seem terribly inappropriate. For guys that pretty much put all this together, you can see very definitely that you kind of blew it. We'll change that. That's okay. Here in the United States, I feel a little sorry for myself now and then. Did it, one of us is committing treason, and so go back to courts in the 1970s. Did courts come out and say there would be no religion in government? Yeah. And in doing so, they took the stereotypical definition of a satanic church. They threw out those three things that make up God and country in our shop manual fashion. Christ rising on the third day, that computer cloud star in the sky, straightening up our emotions and willing the good of another person. And that's completely out of our society. They simply snuck it in. And we're paying the price for it. And so one of us is committing treason. I don't think it's us. And so if you would please pass the word and start getting gals who have children or to call in and still start complaining. Look, I need this much money and my 10-year-old can't afford to pay for me. And if you're a guy and you're a white male chauvinist pig, no matter what color skin you are, a race of Christ, then you speak up. I don't rent property to other people. I don't rent property from other people, bub. Maybe you can get some of those guys at that Oxford and Cambridge, throw the bums out of there and get some people in there who can start straightening up society. And here in Tucson as well. Well, that's enough for now. Please pass the word, and we'll hopefully see you tomorrow at 7 o'clock London time, and then we're going to try and get some more appropriate times here in the United States and Canada, and go to work.